Last week we told you about the probable cause for an arrest early on in the Kristin Smart case. Well, today we're going to share with you the evidence that demands a verdict. You will have an opportunity to know of evidence not yet submitted in the trial. This and a whole lot more on what some people are calling, well, the fastest minutes in podcasting. Well, hello and welcome to today's episode. Today we're going to talk about evidence that demands a verdict, plus we're going to share with you a smoking gun in the case. Well, we're going to get to that in a moment. But first of all, welcome all the new listeners and a host of regular listeners to our podcasts. That's right, from the East Coast to the West Coast and beyond. Well, we're glad to have you listening each week. Hey, we do invite any of you to reach out with a shout out. We enjoy reading your suggestions, comments, questions. And you can even disagree with us. We still love to hear from you. We welcome all of you. Or if you just want to say hi, shout out, what we call out, you can reach me, charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Also, let me take the opportunity to invite you to join with us with our Peacemaker Network program. You see, we show our support to our law enforcement, first responders, and the military. We do all that through this important platform. You can see how we help these guys and how you can be a part of helping these guys as well. Again, go to peacemakernetwork.com. Find out how you can support this podcast and the people who keep us safe. You can do all that for as little as $3 a month. Again, that's peacemakernetwork.com. Everybody that responds and becomes a part of it, you're going to receive a special welcome gift worth over $500, a vacation voucher to help you and your family enjoy some time away and have a little stress relief. Well, we're going to continue our focus this week on the Kristin Smart case. Now, Kristin was a 19-year-old college girl at Cal Poly. That's in San Luis Obispo, California. She attended a party on Friday of Memorial Day weekend way back in 1996. And later that night, or early morning, well, she went missing. And the last person to see her, according to reports, was a young freshman by the name of Paul Flores. He did become a, quote, person of interest, then a suspect. And now he is on trial for her murder. And get this, 26 years later. Now, also Paul's father, Rubin Smart, he's also on trial. He's on trial for accessory after the fact, and he's accused of helping Paul cover up the crime. Now they're being tried together with two different juries and a jurisdiction other than the place that the alleged crime occurred. All that because of publicity. That trial was moved to Monterey County. Now, because of two different juries being set and two people being tried at the same time, well, this trial is set for several weeks and maybe even a couple months. But today, I'm going to give you a peekaboo at some of the evidence that has yet been introduced in the trial. Hey, I'm going to even share with you evidence that may not be allowed in the trial. You see, there are times when real evidence, well, it's just not allowed in some trials. You see, an example of that would be when someone may confess to a crime but was not read their Miranda rights. The right to be silent that everybody has, every one of us. So that type of evidence would not be allowed to enter a trial. Another example is that example of a search warrant, when somebody maybe gave a search warrant or should have had a search warrant, and they found evidence that they would not be able to bring to trial. You see, evidence that was found without a proper search, well, that's called, well, fruit from the poisonous tree, and it cannot be allowed inside the court. Now, some of this evidence you're going to hear today is what some people also view as circumstantial evidence. You see, most all trials have some circumstantial evidence. Let me give you a good example of circumstantial evidence. Well, it's a good example unless you live here in Florida. But say late one night, you hear a weather forecast, and it's forecasting snow overnight. Now, you do not stay up to see the snow, but the next morning you wake up and there are several inches of snow on the ground. Now, you did not see the snow fall, but you do have circumstantial evidence that it did indeed snow. Now, in this case, you're going to hear a lot of circumstantial evidence as well as additional evidence. And the jury is challenged to come to a decision of guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, you can have doubt. It is reasonable to have doubt. But is it evidence beyond reasonable doubt? All right, let's get to the evidence. First, we go back to the night in question. Kristin Smart left with two friends to go out in the evening. She separated herself from those two friends to go to a party near the campus. While there, well, now there's conflicting statements regarding how much, if any, she drank. Some said a lot, some said a little, some said they did not see her drink any. But what is not in conflict is the fact that she was impaired. At least she had the appearance of someone under the influence. Now, while she was at the party, she introduced herself as a person by the name of Roxy. That was even though her name was Kristin. You see, she and the other girls sometime would use a fictitious name when they were going out on the town. I guess that was to keep the creeps from knowing their real names. Well, too bad it did not keep the creeps away from her that night. Now, witnesses will testify to several things about this party and the actions of the night. Remember now, this is 26 years later. And you may ask yourself, how can witnesses testify about what happened 26 years ago? How could they testify about that today? Well, two reasons. First, something dramatic happened during that Memorial Day weekend at Cal Poly. Just like you can remember where you were, no doubt, when you heard about 9/11. Think now how much more you would remember it if you were in the same city that 9/11 happened. You see, this was really a dramatic thing that was somewhat out of place in this small university town. It was a peaceful town, for the most part, and crime was not rampant at all. And also, this case now generated a whole lot of publicity. And also remember, many of these witnesses were interviewed by the police. That's something that most people do not forget when they're interviewed by the police. Combine that with the fact that many of the statements were documented. They were recorded and probably used to refresh witnesses' minds in this coming case. So you can put credibility upon these statements. Juries are told to use their own reasoning in response to the witness statements. So witnesses that night of this tragedy, they will testify that Roxy was flirtatious, that she appeared to be impaired. One witness said that she took him into the bathroom, asked him about some of the guys there, which one she thinks she would like to be with. And quite interesting now in hindsight, that very same witness, well, he said someone that we now know as Paul Flores. Well, when they came out of the bathroom, he immediately approached him, asked him what he did with her in the bathroom. You see, that same witness said that this guy by the name of Paul, that he came across as that he was Kristin's, or a.k.a. Roxy's, boyfriend, though he was everything but. Another person told how Paul Flores approached him and said he thought that Roxy was hot, sexy. That bears notice in Paul's own later statement to police that he did not know her and that she was not the type of girl he was attracted to. Hey, hang on to that thought, because we're going to visit the type of girl Paul was attracted to later. Now, witnesses will also testify that Kristin fell to the floor with a thud, and Paul was standing over her at the time. Now, I'm telling you this because there are some who believe that Paul used some sort of drug as a date rape that night. In fact, as we will later reveal, he had a history of using a date rape drug with women. But this is now just beginning to come to light in the trial. Now later that evening, witnesses will talk about how Kristin was seen lying face down on the lawn outside of the house of the party. Two different people, a guy and a girl. They will all testify how they got her to her feet. We're going to walk her to her dorm. When another guy, just appeared out of nowhere. His name, you got it, Paul Flores. He started to help walk Kristin back to her dorm that night. Now, both of these witnesses will testify that they separated. Tim, the guy, well, he separated because he had to go get his vehicle, and she was already being helped by another young lady and this guy by the name of Paul. And the young lady, well, when she got to her dorm, she separated because Paul insisted that he would go on and would see to it that he walked Kristin back to her dorm. Now, that same young lady said that as they partied, Paul tried to get her to give him a kiss. She thought it was a little weird. She refused. Then he asked for a hug. Well, finally, she said, she may have shaken his hand. And witness after witness that night will tell you that Paul Flores appeared weird and creepy to them. Now, Paul Flores said to police and others that next he walked her a little further toward her dorm, and then he separated. He went his way. She went her way. Now get this, he said that even though Kristin was not able to stand and walk on her own up to that time. He had been helping her along with others. I know, you see where this is going, right? Paul Flores was the last person seen with Kristin Smart that night. Now another man will testify that while he was riding his bike home early that morning from studying, he saw two people that matched Paul and Kristin's description. Saw them in a physical confrontation early that Saturday morning. He saw that as he rode by one of the common areas in the dorm rooms of the campus. So that gets you somewhat up to date on the events of that night. Now, what other evidence do we have on Paul Flores other than his actions the night of the party? Well, we've got a whole lot more, and we're going to tell you about that in a moment. But right now it's time for what we call at Charlie Crimebuster, our Crazy Crook Story. We share a Crazy Crook story to kind of lighten the load of these dark stories. And so from the dumb crook line now comes this story. Story about a crazy crook on the run. On the run in one of the longest and fastest car chases ever. However, there's one thing that stands out about this particular crazy crook. Oh, he was a good driver, at least. He was able to elude police for a long, long time. And he did it without any accident. However, one thing that stands out about this chase, sometimes going over 100 miles per hour. 100 miles per hour. And in this chase, running around all over the place, at every turn, at every single turn, this crazy crook used his turn signal to signal his turn for the police chasing him. I guess good driving etiquette, well, that's hard to ignore. And that, my friend, this crazy crook who was being chased by the police and used his turn signal to signal his turns, that, my friend, is Charlie Crimebuster's Crazy Crook Story of the Week. Well, now back to our main focus. We were targeting in on our suspect, Paul Flores, and we were focused on his behavior that night. Now, Paul's behavior, both before that night and after, is evidence that demands a verdict. Prior to that night, Paul was actually taken into custody by police, now get this, for being a peeping Tom, though he was not charged. You see, women had reported that he had climbed up on the balcony of their apartment, was peeping in at them. And several others, he charged that he had been making phone calls to them with heavy breathing on the phone. All evidence of a stalker or predatory behavior. And this, my friend, was prior to the night that Kristin disappeared after being in his presence. Now, Paul, in his statement to the police, said that Kristin was not his type, but his behavior says otherwise. His behavior says that his type were women who were intoxicated and are drugged and could not resist his unwanted advances, or perhaps someone who had a fetish to want to have sex with drugged women. Get this now. On June the 25th, the San Luis Obispo County District Attorney's Office, they received a letter from the Los Angeles County District Attorney, and that office granted permission to prosecute Paul on 2 counts of rape in the local jurisdiction. The documents claimed that from 2011 to 2017, in the town of San Pedro, Paul Flores raped 2 women while they were drunk. Now, within the prosecution 43-page response to the defense opposition to amending the motion, well, it was a detailed account of the case. A case that dated all the way back to the mid-1990s. You see, back there, a student-athlete, another resident at Muir Hall, he stated that he and Smart had confided in one another, and he confirmed that he saw Paul Flores in Smart's room a few times around February or March 1996. He confirmed Paul Flores had been following Smart and lurking around the Muir Hall dorm rooms. Now here is the mind blower. Within the prosecution's response, 23 additional victims of Paul Flores. And some of these sexual assaults, well, they date back way prior to Kristin Smart's disappearance. Many of the women claim they were drugged and raped by Paul Flores. That's according to the records. During the February 4th, 2020 search of Paul's home in San Pedro, well, authorities, they seized prescriptions for tramadol and Flexeril, both confirmed to be, quote, date rape drugs. My friend, a total of 29 women have made complaints against Paul Flores. That's our suspect that's now on the trial for the murder of Kristin. Now, many of those will not be allowed to go to the jury in this trial, but several will that fit the description of this particular alleged crime. Among the testimony will be a bar bouncer. A bar bouncer will testify of watching Paul Flores stalk women at his bar, and of his own experience of watching Paul appear to grope a drunk woman who was taken to her car, and while she was passed out, Paul attempted to climb in the car with her, even though he did not even know her. But thankfully, this bouncer, well, he protected this vulnerable woman from no doubt what would have been another rape. Now, add to this evidence of Paul's behavior are bruises. Yep, bruises. Paul was seen that weekend with a black eye, scratches and bruises by others, including police that saw it. Now, he said he got the black eye from a pickup basketball game. That was knocked down pretty quickly as untrue from those who played basketball with him that weekend. But then he said, well, he must have gotten it from working on his vehicle. And then later he just said, well, I just woke up with it. Well, no wonder when he finally did get an attorney, they told him to shut up, stop talking. And boy, did he shut up. You see, when there was a civil suit brought against him for wrongful death, well, since the police had been stalled out in the other investigation, well, her family brought a civil case against Paul Flores. And guess what? Paul Flores, well, this talkative man, well, at the civil suit, he refused to answer their question. Refused to answer it for fear it would incriminate him. Now, my friend, that is evidence that will not be allowed in court. You see, even guilty people have the right to remain silent. By the way, before he was told to shut up, well, he told police that Kristin was not his type. But yet, as we've told you already, what? Yep, 29 women have came forward to say that it is apparent that drugged women are indeed his type. Well, my next comment on the evidence, well, it is, well, who let the dogs out? By that I mean the dogs that hid on Kristin's smell in Paul Flores' dorm room right afterwards. The dogs, well, they hid at Paul's mattress, at the wastebasket, and on the phone in Paul's room. Just another layer of many layers of evidence that does demand a verdict. Now, there is also evidence that actually links Paul's dad, Rubin, to the crime. You see, after that weekend, Paul's mom, Susan, well, she told her co-workers that early that Saturday morning, well, Paul's dad, Rubin, that he got a phone call in the middle of the night morning, Immediately, he jumped out of bed, left abruptly. It is believed that Rubin got up in the morning to come to his son's rescue and helped him, Paul, dispose of Kristin's body. By the way, remember that civil deposition I talked to you about a moment ago? Rubin, Paul's father, he also pled the fifth and refused to testify to questions that would have tied him up to the cover-up of Kristin's murder. That, too, will not be allowed before the jury. But there is one statement that might make it to the jury regarding Rubin. That was when police were questioning him, and they were referring then to researching his wife's property and another person's property. Well, he said, perhaps without thinking, well, why search them? I'm the one with the felony, not them. Words to the effect that he committed the felony, not them. And those words may no doubt make it before the jury. And then, my friend, there's a search of the property of Rubin, that found with a ground penetration radar what appeared to be a grave under the deck of his home. And there was an analysis of the ground that, get this, found elements consistent of a decomposing body under the deck. You see, it is suspected that Kristin at first was buried under his home's deck, then later removed, and there is evidence to support that a body had indeed been buried there while wrapped in something like a tarp that would exclude bones from releasing, but it would not, my friend, keep the liquid of a decomposing body from seeping into the ground, and they found evidence of exactly that. Hey, add to this, there was an earring found on the property, an earring that matched a set of earrings that Kristin had. Unfortunately, that too may not make it back in the trial. You know why? Because, believe it or not, something as important as this, well, the police lost the evidence bag that contained it. Evidence that links Paul and his dad, Rubin, together to this tragic loss of life. Well, in just a moment, my friend, I'm going to share with you what I believe is a smoking gun. And again, unfortunately, that evidence the jury will not be able to consider. But you will, and I will, and I am sure of your own verdict in this case. But now it is time, before we get to that, to what we call our Courageous Citizen of the Week story. And this one comes to us from Clay County, Alabama. But it ties back to us here in Central Florida. There was an Apopka man. He was recently killed during an attempted robbery at the Talladega National Forest in Alabama. That's according to Clay County Sheriff's Office. Adam Simji, 22 years of age, was visiting the forest with his girlfriend, Michaela Paulus, when they were flagged down by a woman on the side of the road. This is according to a GoFundMe set up by Simji's family. You see, according to the University of Central Florida, Simji, he was a student at the university since fall of 2021. He was enrolled in the classes for this fall semester. Deputies said that this woman had asked Simji for help with a car, and after Simji offered to get help from the ranger station, well, the woman, later identified as Yasmin Hyder, well, she pulled a gun and made the couple walk back into the woods. And when Hyder lowered her guard, well, Simji, he put out his own firearm, exchanged fire with her, and unfortunately, he suffered fatal injuries in the process. Clay County deputies said Simji died at the scene, having been shot in the back. Deputies said Paulus, his girlfriend, was not injured in the shooting. Paulus was actually found performing CPR on Simji when law enforcement arrived, according to the sheriff's office. And in an interview, Paulus told CBS affiliate Andrew Lindbergh that Simji died saving her life. So here's a young boyfriend who gave his life to protect his girlfriend. And that, my friend, is Charlie Crimebuster's Courageous Citizen of the Week story. Now to the smoking gun. In the numerous times throughout this case, there have been attempts, now get this, attempts to make a deal with the prosecution on the behalf of Paul Flores' defense team and our representatives. That attempt was to get him off of any jail time, now get this, in exchange, are you listening, for him to lead authorities to the body of Kristin Smart. Did you hear that? Trying to get out of any jail time if he could show them where the body was. Now, of course, prosecutors rightly would not let him skate on such a charge. However, because of all this being protected, privileged speech, it cannot be used as evidence in the trial. But it does definitely prove to us that Paul Flores knows where Kristin Smart's body is, and we know that means he is responsible for her death. Now I believe that a preponderance of circumstantial evidence, along with the additional physical evidence, will be enough to convict Paul of these charges along with his father. However, you really can never really know what a jury might do, can you? Can you say O.J. Simpson? Can you say Casey Anthony? Well, if I was on this jury, I would vote guilty. What would you say? Well, there's plenty more to come in this trial. But before going, let me remind you again of the hotline you can call if you or someone you know has been sexually abused. That number is 1-800-656-4673. That's 1-800-656-4673. They have all kinds of help for people who've been sexually assaulted. Now that number, along with our contact information and how you can join the Peacemaker Network, well, they all will be left in our show notes. So this is Charlie Crimebuster. Until this time next time, reminding you, stay safe, stay alert. For the life you save, well, it may be your very own.